Hey, what's up, everybody? Donnie B, Learn Pro Recording, LPR, the business of making music. How's your mom and them? Everybody good? Hey, you know what? Today I want to talk to you about the signal path in our Studio A here at ES Audio Recording Studio. We have an analog console in there and a patch bay and all this kind of cool stuff. I'm just going to run down the signal path of where the signal comes from, where it goes to, and all the cool stuff that's happening to it along the way. But of course, before we get to that, I got something free for you, man. Go grab our Studio Growth Formula. 100% free. Just go grab it. LearnProRecording.com/Studio Growth Formula. You know, that thing's full of information that can help you build, grow, and scale your studio into something that could possibly #quit your day job. So, hey, if you'd like to download the slides from today's presentation, there you go. It's LearnProRecording.com/signal flow. Go grab the slides. There's some clickable links in there, which you guys might like. And if you're ready to go, let's run that intro. Okay, everybody, we're going to take a look at the signal flow of our Studio A here at ES Audio Recording Studios in Los Angeles. Studio A is our larger studio. It's meant to accommodate larger bands and bigger things like that. So there's actually 40 inputs from the room, and we got 40 inputs into DAWs. The console itself is the Audient ASP4816, and what that means is that there's 48 on the mix and 16 recording buses. That's kind of what the numbers mean there. So we're going to take a look at this console and see what the signal flow is and where it comes from. And as a bonus, at the end of this, I'm going to run through our vocal chain, the signal flow of our one of our main vocal chains that we use quite often for vocals. So let's take a tour of our analog console, which is located in Studio A at ES Audio Recording Studios in Los Angeles, California. Our studios are all analog front end with DAW recording capabilities. Of course, Studio A does have tape machines. We have a 2-inch 24-track and a 4-track half-inch, quarter-inch machine for mastering. As a bonus today, we're also going to take a look at our vocal chain in the studio. Remember, if you have any questions about any of the items that we mentioned here in these slides, you can always reach out. You can email info@learnprorecording.com, or then the studio website if you want to check out the studio. It's ES Audio Recording Studios, and just click the link there. It's actually esaudio.com if you're listening to the podcast. Anyway, here is the console. This is by Audient. It's the ASP4816. At the top there, you see the channel meters. Then next you have the channel inputs, the channel auxiliaries with the matrix. I'm going to explain what the matrix is in a sec. Then you have the EQ. Then you have what they call the short fader. And then you have the long fader. So basically, this is an inline console. And what the short fader does, imagine this. The signal comes in the top and goes all the way down. Then it goes out the short fader. It gets recorded. Then it comes back to the long fader so you can monitor it. Back in the day, those would have been called channel faders and monitor faders. Okay, then you have, on the other side, you have the power supply status and the master meterings. All the meters are LEDs. I'm a fan of the VU, but I don't mind the LEDs. They're fine. You got your talkback mic. You basically plug in any kind of mic right there. You have your subgroup meters, which I'll explain the subgroups in a bit. And stereo inputs. The stereo inputs are like for returning, say, effects, say a reverb or a delay or something. Those are great for that. And then you got your auxiliary masters to send out to said reverbs and delays and effects, things like that. Also, your auxiliaries can be for headphone mixes if you need to do that. The foldbacks, the studio foldbacks, are your headphone mixes. You can send those from the channels, from the stereo returns, and from the buses. And you have a built-in oscillator. This console has a built-in SSL-style bus compressor. It's not SSL, but if you look closely at the numbers, they're the same. We actually have, in this studio, we actually have an SSL bus compressor, a stereo. We have the SSL Bus Plus, the stereo bus compressor. Then next we have a talkback section, and then we have the group and subgroup and line faders, and then you have your master fader or your mix fader. Okay, so moving on, the input pod. Listen, we're gonna break this down one part at a time. Okay, so I'm not gonna go too deep into each one of these. I'm just gonna point out the bigger things, for time's sake. But anyway, this is the input pod. This is your microphone's plugged in here, right? Your microphone and your line. You have there's a meter. Then you have a 3-segment meter, which is for the input. You can actually switch those. Input could be the long meter, the 20-segment meter, or you can flip them. You have inserts, so you can insert something into the DAW path, and then you can also insert something into the microphone line path. There's 2 different paths on this input pod, and they're actually on the back. They're 2 different inputs. Your DAW input, and then the DAW input is coming back from your recording. The mic line input is coming from your mics and your lines going into the recording. Okay. Then, of course, you have a 48-volt phantom power switch. You have a polarity switch and a high-pass filter switch. This is the routing matrix. Now, this is kind of cool. This is like very, if you guys are familiar with SSL, this is very SSL-esque. It's styled from an SSL console. But so these switches do dual functions. In the recordings, when you're recording, it sends it to the recording bus. But you can also send it to a subgroup, or send it to a subgroup and send it to a subgroup, if this makes sense. It does all these. It depends on how we're actually using the console at the moment. So if you think about it, you've got 16. You could route it 1 through 16 to the buses. You can take a direct out from the channel, or you can route through the bus. And there's a reason to route through the bus, like say you need a little bit extra gain. There's a master bus output, which we're going to get to in a bit. The shift gives you access to buses 9 through 16. The top numbers are 1 through 8, and then you can bus through 9 through 16. So unfortunately, there's only 8 subgroups, so the 8 subgroups have access to route to the subgroups, but you can send to 9 through 16 to the bus outputs. Then you can pan odd and even buses, okay? Long fader replaces the short fader signal being sent to the routing switches, and so that's what's being sent to the switches, is whether you're sending the short fader or the long fader. That's the number 4 there, the LF/SF button. Level adjust how much is going out the auxiliaries, and you can the pairs. You can do 1 and 2 send to the short fader, and you can also make them pre-fader for headphone sends if you need to. So the QA and the QB are identical in operation to the others, except that they can be individually switched into the short fader path for a headphone foldback. So next we have the equalizer section, or the EQ section. You have basically a high frequency shelf and a low frequency shelf. This places the HF/LF equalizer in the circuit. You turn it on, you put it in, you can tell it whether to go to the short fader or the long fader. Now, these are cool because you can flip these, and you can use half of the EQ for one of the faders, half of the EQ for the other fader. This is great for if you're mixing and you need more than 16 faders. Then you can go into you can go into the short faders on the mix and use those as part of the mix. You can put those into the mix path and use those and split the EQs, and it's pretty neat. The EQs are very musical, and the thing you got to remember is that you have to put them in, and then you can choose whether you're using that on the short fader or the long fader. Okay, the short fader. Here is the short fader. The short fader has a pan. Then you can put it into the fader itself. You also have a solo and a cut or a mute. A cut is mute. Understand this console is a British console, so the terminology is a little bit different. So there's a button there, the source selects the post fader long fader signal as the input to the short fader. So what this means, this is an SSL trick that was on the SSL 4000 console, that it allows you to take what's coming in from the long fader and send it back into the short fader for another auxiliary output. If 6 auxiliaries aren't enough, you can actually have 7. And the thing you want to do is not put that into the mix, because you've already got the long fader in the mix. So if you basically think of it as another auxiliary output, okay? So there you go. And then, of course, the solo and the cut allows whether you are soloing the channel or cutting the channel or muting the channel. So the flip and pan. The flip swaps the input between the short fader and the long fader. You can do that if you need to. If you need more of a fader, especially during a mix, right? So I honestly don't do that much. I mean, I haven't really found a time or a place to have to do that much, but I mean, it's there if you do need it. And the mix knob, of course, puts the whatever signal's running into the long fader or the short fader into the mix so you can hear it. There's also a pan control, so you can go left or right. The solo allows for the to be soloed, and the cut allows it to be cut or muted. Okay, so there's that. The long fader. This is the long fader, which controls the level of the long fader signal. There's a 10 dB mark, a plus 10 dB mark, and the fader is fully open at this point and introduces 10 dB of gain into the signal path. So if you're looking for the zero is the zero. That's the 0 dB mark. That's the normal operation for the fader. That way it gives you a little bit of headroom if you need a little extra. And of course you can pull it down if you're done with it. You know what I mean? If you don't need as much. So, I mean, understand it's kind of like mixing in a DAW with the faders on the mixer in a DAW, but they're actual real live faders. Studio speakers and foldback, source select. These are where you're sending your signal to, okay? So the number 3 is the speakers in actually the studio for the artist to hear things. If you want to play things back on the speakers in the studio, you can. So basically you have to turn that on and then tell it what source to send to those speakers. The control room, you can send QA or QB, so you can actually do a B mix or a C mix, whatever, and send that to it if you wanted a different mix than what's going on in the control room. Same thing with the foldbacks. You can send to the foldbacks either the control room or QA or QB. Now, the foldbacks are what's going to, say, the headphones. So let's say you want to send the drummer the click, but you don't want to send the click to the singer. So you send the click out QA and not out QB. So your singer mix will be QB and your drummer mix will be QA. Does that make sense? Absolutely it does. Okay, control room monitoring. So this is where you're going to listen to things in the control room. Now this gets a little bit weird in that you got to understand that you've got 4 different sources. You've got your main, Alt 1, Alt 2, and Alt 3. These are the speaker outputs. Okay, the main speakers are your main speakers, and you got a separate volume control for that. So then you've got Alt 1 out, and that volume control for Alt 1 is above Alt 1. The volume control for Alt 2 is above Alt 2. You cannot send out multiple at the same time. Fortunately, you can't. You can only send out one output at a time. You do have a mono switch. You also have a cut left and a cut right and a cut both, meaning you can mute one, mute the other, or mute both. You also have a dim switch, which will turn it down a little bit. It says here in the manual that it's 15 decibels, but I honestly think it's more like 20 or 25. A big thing, especially we're going to talk about the talkback in the next section. When you use the talkback, it automatically dims, but you can't hear your artist speaking back to you. So next we have the bus compressor. There is a bus compressor built into the master bus, and this is, if you look at the numbers and you look at how it looks and how it feels, it is an SSL bus compressor. It is a stereo bus compressor, but the metering's a little different. It's just an LED segment meter, and it sounds great. It sounds musical. It really glues your mix together, but it only works on what's on the bus compressor. There is no side chaining into it. It's lacking in some features of the original SSL bus compressor, but it is really well done, and it is just built in. You just push it in, and you're good to go. Stereo inputs, this is where you would bring back, say, the output of a reverb or the output of a delay, that kind of thing. And you can also send those to the foldbacks. You can also route them to the DAW recording device with the buttons there at the top. You could send them to 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, or you can shift it down 9 through 16. Okay? So the foldbacks allow that signal coming in there to be sent back to the headphones, for instance. And then you have a trim coming back in. You also have a rotary fader, which allows how much signal is going to the mix. You do have to put it into the mix or take it out of the mix, and then you can route how much is going in to the mix. You also have a solo and a cut button. Okay, so this is the subgroup outputs or the line ends the line inputs 17 through 24 or subgroup outputs. These can do 2 things. There's a pan knob, and then there's a mix to the subgroup and a solo and a cut. Okay, so this is the line inputs 17 through 24 or the subgroup faders. Okay, these are simply the faders, how much is going to the master bus. okay? The talkback system, here's the talkback system. So you have a level control for your talkback, which covers a couple of things, but it all comes from that microphone that you plug in on the front of the console, okay? A slate bus output allows you to talk to all the buses. So in other words, if you're in record mode and you want to slate, say, oh, this is take one, if you press the slate bus output button, it sends that microphone signal to all the record channels. Okay, the studio loudspeakers, say your artist is in the studio and they don't have their headphones on, you can speak to them through the speakers and tell them to put their headphones on. The artist foldback sends that microphone signal, the talkback microphone signal, to the artist foldback systems, foldback A and foldback B. But like I said earlier, it does dim the system a little bit too much. Basically, it's kind of difficult to hear your artist talking back to you, to have a conversation with your artist. What we do is we have a microphone plugged into one of the channels. We use a plugin called Mute-O-Matic. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a link to download the free plugin called Mute-O-Matic, which basically is exactly what it sounds like. When you press play on your DAW, it mutes your talkback mic. This comes in really handy when you're trying to have your producer speak to your artist and you don't have to stop and press the button. You can continue to do your work as the engineer and the producer can talk to the artist all day. When you press record and play, it will mute the microphone. It's awesome. Auxiliary masters. This sends out the auxiliary signal to wherever you're sending it. QA, QB, AUX 1 through 6. So you also have a link button, which means that you can link 1 and 3, you can link 2 and 4, you can link 5 and 7, that thing. So it allows you to send both auxiliaries out one common signal, okay, if you need to. But, you know, you would use these signals to send it to, say, a reverb unit and then return it back on a stereo channel after it gets the reverb signal, that kind of thing. Just like you would in your DAW, except this is real life and you have to actually move knobs and press buttons. Okay, the bus master trims. Now, this is what I was talking about. Instead of using the direct outputs on the channel, you would use the bus masters to send out to the recording. You have 16 bus masters and you have 16 channels. So using the direct outs is kind of irrelevant. This will give you 10 more decibels of signal sending out if you need to boost that signal a little bit going out the bus to the recording device. That's all. That's actually quite nice to have a little bit extra headroom. The master fader, or the gas pedal, if you will. This is where you send everything out. So you send all your mix buses or sub-mix buses into the master bus, and then this goes out the master fader. This is basically your overall volume. What I normally do is I push this to 0 and leave it there. So, as promised, here is our vocal chain here in Studio A. This is one of our more popular vocal chains. We have other preamps, we have other equalizers, and yes, we have other compressors. And yes, we have many other microphones. This is the most popular at the moment. We have a Sony C800G large diaphragm tube condenser microphone that, yes, is modified. There is only one, and we have it. We run that into a Neve 1073 500 preamp. That does have an EQ if we need EQ on it. Then we insert a TubeTech CL1B for compression. This is our main vocal chain in Studio A. This is awesome. We have clients that come here specifically because we have this vocal chain. We also have a solid state Logic, the Bus Plus. We can insert this into the master section of the console. We can use this individually as channels when we are tracking. We can use this as a classic stereo, a sidechain stereo, a dual mono, or a mid-side. Now, this thing is very cool because it's got a built-in dynamic EQ on each channel, and you also have access to a low-frequency gain on each channel, as it did on the G-Bus console. You can sidechain in and out any other signal path. This thing is amazing. It's fairly new for us. We've only had it a couple of weeks, but I can tell you what, this is one of the greatest pieces of equipment I've installed into this studio in a minute. This thing is amazing. I've used it on drums. I've used it on vocals. I've used it on guitar so far, and it's only been in for a week and a half. I tell you what, if you guys want to come check this out, if you're local, come bring a mix over here, man, and run it through the system and see what it can do for your mixes, okay? Hey, thanks for watching, man. And for more information, please reach out to me here at info@learnprorecording.com. And if you like what we do here, please consider signing up for free so you get these emails sent to you every week with this free training, free plugins, free templates. Everything's free. Well, I'm not trying to make any money on this stuff, but I do like to pay for things, and if you do choose to sign up to the community, the membership in the community, there's just a plethora of tons of stuff you get when you do sign up and when you're there. But come over and check out what we do, man. Just come over to learnprorecording.com, click on that button on the front there, get signed up. Hey, and if you don't like it, unsubscribe. You don't like the emails I'm sending you, unsubscribe. You don't know, I don't mean to bother anybody. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not trying to be a sleazy salesperson or anything. I just want to try to give back and keep the art of recording alive. That's what I try to do. Hey, the studio website's right there, ES Audio Recording Studios. I'm also going to make these slides downloadable so you guys can just click these links. If you'd like to check out the studio, if you're listening to us on the podcast, it's esaudio.com. Learn Pro Recording is learnprorecording.com. And remember, please like and subscribe on this YouTube channel. It really helps us to keep bringing you this stuff for free. And I appreciate you, and thank you so much. And we'll see you guys Wednesday on the blog post. My name is Donnie B. I'm out of here. Peace.